In Red Hollow, Nevada Territory, 1887, a blacklisted geologist was about to gamble her last 10 cents on what everyone called cursed ground. What started as a desperate land purchase took a shocking turn when she pressed her ear to the boarded mine entrance and heard something that shouldn't exist, a mechanical heartbeat rising from 200 feet below. Margaret Maggie Corbyn wasn't your typical frontier prospector. For 7 years, she had spent her life challenging the Territorial Mining Board's falsified surveys, known for her relentless pursuit of truth that cost her everything: her government position, her reputation, and nearly her life. When she encountered fresh nails on boards that should have been weathered for years, she had no idea she was walking into a decades-old conspiracy worth $57 million. Maggie descended into that darkness with a blacksmith and a journalist, unearthing not silver, but something far more dangerous. Dr. Isaac Harrow's revolutionary refining machine, and the ledger proving 17 miners were murdered to keep it buried. What began as a 10-cent gamble to escape ruin would become a federal investigation that toppled judges, exposed industrial sabotage across 3 territories, and revolutionized an entire industry. Red Hollow would never be the same after one woman refused to let powerful men bury the truth along with their victims. The mine still hums beneath the Nevada desert. Some say it's the wind. Maggie Corbyn knows better. It's the sound of secrets that won't stay buried, and the promise that integrity, once awakened, can never be silenced again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She bought a cursed mine for 10 cents, then heard a sound that would change everything she thought she knew about the earth beneath her feet. I stared at the contract on the banker's desk, my hands steadier than his despite everything I had to lose. 10 cents, that's all Silas Kettering wanted for the abandoned mining claim that had been sitting sealed for 7 years. Everyone in Red Hollow knew it was worthless. Cursed, they said, by the men who died there. Everyone except me could see the fear in the banker's eyes as he pushed the papers toward me with trembling fingers. But there was something wrong with this picture, something that made my geologist's mind scream warnings even as my desperate circumstances whispered acceptance. Why would a banker who charged interest on pennies suddenly sell mineral rights for less than the cost of a meal? Why did he keep glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to stop this transaction? And why did the contract already have my name written on it in careful script before I'd even walked into his office? Miss Corbyn, Kettering said, his voice hollow. I must inform you, as a matter of legal obligation, that the property in question has been deemed unsuitable for excavation. The Territorial Mining Board declared it unstable after the collapse of 1880. 17 men lost. Shaft sealed by order of Judge Malaran himself. Then you understand the risks, he said, relaxing slightly when I nodded. I understood more than he knew. I understood that soil doesn't lie, and the samples I'd collected from the property boundary told a story that contradicted every official report. I understood that abandoned mines don't maintain structural integrity for 7 years unless someone has been maintaining them. And I understood that a woman blacklisted from government service doesn't get many second chances. I signed the contract and took the rusted key he offered. It was heavier than it should have been, warm despite the cool morning air. When I held it up to the light, I could see fresh scratches along the teeth, wear patterns that couldn't be more than a few weeks old. Who's been using this key, Mr. Kettering? His face went pale. No one, not for years. But I'd studied metallurgy alongside geology, and I knew the difference between manufacturing marks and recent use. Someone had been inside my cursed mine. The walk to the property took 20 minutes through Red Hollow's sun-bleached street. The town clung to the eastern slope of the Silver Peak Range like a desperate prayer, its wooden buildings weathered gray by wind and disappointment. I'd arrived here 3 weeks ago, with nothing but my surveying equipment and $42.10, all that remained after the government dismissed me for theoretical irregularities. Being right while female earned you exile, not vindication. The gate opened with a shriek of protesting metal. Beyond it, The land stretched barren and pale, dotted with sagebrush and skeletal mining equipment left to rust. The shaft structure stood 100 yards ahead, a wooden framework surrounding a boarded entrance, leaning slightly to the south. Warning signs in faded red paint declared the site condemned. Someone had hung horseshoes on the boards for protection against the curse. But I wasn't interested in superstition. I was interested in the fresh nails. I knelt beside the entrance, running my fingers along the boards. Someone had replaced 3 of them recently, the wood still pale where it hadn't been exposed to weather. The nail heads showed no rust, no oxidation. These couldn't be more than a month old. I out my field journal and began sketching the site, noting every detail with the precision my training trained. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was wind moving through abandoned equipment, but as I pressed my ear closer to the boards, I realized this was something else entirely. A vibration, low, rhythmic, almost mechanical in its regularity, like the pulse of something alive but not living. I placed my palm flat against the wood. The vibration traveled through the boards and into my bones, a frequency that shouldn't exist in nature. My scientific mind tried to categorize it. Tectonic movement, underground water flow, settling rock, but none of those explanations fit the pattern. This was too regular, too consistent, too deliberate. The sun was setting now, painting the desert in shades of copper and rust. In the failing light, I could see dust particles dancing above the shaft, opening, moving in strange patterns that defied the wind's direction. I should have left then, but 7 years of exile had taught me that caution was a luxury reserved for those who had something left to lose. Instead, I sat on the ground beside the shaft and listened to the earth hum its secret song. When I finally stood to leave, I noticed boot prints in the dust near the fence line, fresh prints, made by expensive boots with distinctive heel patterns, the kind you'd see on a man of means, not a common miner. The prints led to the gate and back toward town, but they'd been carefully obscured in places, as if someone had tried to sweep away evidence of their passage. Whoever had been here hadn't wanted to be seen, and they'd been studying the shaft, measuring it, perhaps trying to decide what to do about a woman who'd just bought their secret for 10 cents. As I walked back toward Red Hollow's scattered lights, I could still feel that vibration humming through my boots, as if the earth itself was trying to tell me something. The question wasn't whether the mine was cursed. The question was what someone had hidden down there, and why they were so desperate to make sure it stayed buried forever. I returned at dawn with my surveying equipment, determined to prove the curse was merely bad science. Someone had placed a crude warning sign on the fence post overnight, a piece of board with 3 words painted in hasty black letters, "Leave it sealed." The paint was still tacky to the touch. This had been placed within the last few hours. Someone was watching. I left the sign where it was and unlocked the gate. The mine looked different in daylight, less ominous but somehow more wrong. The ground around the shaft showed signs of recent excavation, subtle but unmistakable to someone trained to read earth. Someone had been digging here, testing the stability of the ground, then carefully covering their tracks. I set up my transit and began taking measurements. The mathematics flowed through me like prayer, offering certainty in a world that had become uncertain the moment I challenged men who didn't like being corrected. That's when I noticed the anomaly. According to my calculations, the mine should have collapsed completely. The geological surveys from 1880 indicated that the shaft had been compromised at multiple support points. But the ground was level, stable. My measurements suggested that beneath the sealed entrance there was still a hollow void, a cavity that shouldn't exist if the official reports were accurate. Someone had been maintaining this mine in secret. I took soil samples at 6 points around the shaft. The soil contained metallic residue that shouldn't be present in silver mining operations. The particles were too uniform, too refined, as if they'd been produced by some industrial process. I was examining the residue when I heard an approaching wagon. A man drove it, broad-shouldered and sun-weathered, with a blacksmith's thick forearms. Beside him sat a girl of perhaps 10 years, her dark hair in practical braids, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You must be Miss Corbyn," he called out, "the woman who bought Kettering's curse." I stood, brushing dust from my skirt. "Margaret Corbyn, though most people call me Maggie. Sam Dorsey. I run the smithy in town. This is my daughter, Annie." He climbed down from the wagon. "I thought I should come by. Your predecessor, the man who owned this land before Kettering took it, was a friend of mine, Thomas Blaine. He died in that shaft 7 years ago, along with 16 others." The official report said the tunnel collapsed during routine excavation. I said. Sam's expression darkened. "Tom was too careful for that. He knew rock structure. Something else happened down there." Annie spoke up from the wagon. "Papa, tell her about the singing." Sam shifted uncomfortably. "Annie hears things at night." "I'm not imagining it," Annie insisted, climbing down. "The mine sings at night, not ghosts. Like when Papa's machines are running at the forge. A metal sound, a working sound." I looked at Sam. "You've heard it too?" He nodded. "A humming, late at night. Most folks think it's wind or echoes, but I think something happened in that shaft 7 years ago, something that had nothing to do with bad luck." "My measurements suggest the mine hasn't collapsed at all," I said. "The shaft is still intact. Someone's been maintaining it." Sam's jaw tightened. "Then Tom didn't die because of an accident." We stood in silence, the morning sun climbing higher. Then Sam walked to the northern edge of the claim. "There's something else you should see. Found this last week." He pushed aside a clump of sage, revealing a wooden post with a pulley system attached. But this wasn't old equipment. The rope was new. The fibers, still bright. The pulley showed recent lubrication. "Someone's been lowering things into that shaft," I said, kneeling to examine it. "Recently." Annie moved closer. "What would they lower? Equipment, or someone lowered themselves down to inspect what's below?" Sam crouched beside me. "The question is why? If the mine's officially closed, why would anyone take the risk?" I stood, my mind racing through possibilities. The metallic residue, the preserved shaft structure, the mechanical humming. These were pieces of a pattern I was only beginning to see. "Because there's something down there," I said. "Something worth more than silver. Something worth killing 17 men to hide." Annie's voice was wild but clear. "Are you going to open it?" I looked at the shaft, at the board someone had so carefully replaced. Every instinct trained into me said to proceed carefully, to gather more evidence. But I'd tried careful. I'd tried building cases, and all it had earned me was exile. "Yes," I said. "I'm going to open it, but I'm going to need help." Sam straightened. "I can bring tools tomorrow. Crowbars, rope, proper lighting, and I know how to shore up unstable passages." "Papa," Annie said, worry creeping into her voice. "What if it really is cursed?" Sam knelt beside his daughter. "Annie girl, the only curses that really exist are the ones we make by turning away from truth when it's hard to face. Miss Maggie here is going to help us learn what truth your grandfather died for." As they drove away, I returned to my measurements. That night I compiled my findings by lamplight. Someone had been actively maintaining a mine that should have self-destructed 7 years ago. The metallic residue suggested industrial processes beyond simple excavation, and the humming indicated machinery still functioning deep below ground. But the most troubling finding was simple, that fresh rope had been used within the last month. Someone was still accessing that shaft. Tomorrow Sam and I would open it. We would descend into that darkness and confront whatever truth had cost 17 men their lives. Under a blazing afternoon sun, Sam and I pried open the mine's boarded entrance. What emerged from that darkness would change everything. Sam arrived at noon with a wagon loaded with equipment, crowbars, rope, lanterns, wooden beams, and something wrapped in canvas, a breathing apparatus of his own design, modified from a firefighter's smoke hood. "If there's bad air down there, this should help," he explained. I examined the device with professional interest. Sam had retrofitted it with valves and filters, showing an understanding of mechanics that went beyond simple blacksmithing. You've done this kind of work before. I apprenticed with a mining engineer before settling into smithing. Learned that most mine accidents aren't about bad luck. They're about men ignoring the warnings the earth gives them. We approached the shaft together. The day was oppressively hot, but as we neared the boarded entrance, the temperature dropped noticeably. Cold air moved through cracks in the boards, unnaturally cold, carrying the scent of metal and something like ozone after a lightning strike. Sam positioned his crowbar against the first board. Last chance to walk away, Miss Maggie. There was never any walking away, I said. He drove the crowbar home. The boards came away with shrieks of protesting nails. With each one we removed, that cold air grew stronger. When we pulled away the fifth board, something shifted in the darkness beyond. A grinding sound, deep and prolonged, like stone moving against stone. The sound faded, replaced by that humming. But now, without the boards muffling it, I could hear its true character. This was mechanical, rhythmic, purposeful. Something was running down there. Something had been running for 7 years. Sweet mercy, Sam breathed. What is that? I lit a lantern. The flame immediately bent toward the shaft opening, pulled by the current of air. Whatever it is, it's drawing air from below. That means ventilation. That means engineering. We removed the remaining boards, revealing the full shaft entrance. The wooden supports framed a passage, descending at a 40-degree angle, but interspersed with roof pick marks were smoother sections, walls reinforced with steel plates, riveted in place with industrial precision. Sam ran his hand along one of the plates. This isn't silver mining equipment. This is what you'd use if you were building something meant to last. Something you didn't want anyone to find. I lowered the lantern further, trying to gauge the depth. In the brief illumination, I saw more steel reinforcements and cables running along the shaft walls, disappearing into the depths. Modern cables, like those used for telegraph systems. Someone's been powering something down there, I said. Sam tied a rope around his waist, securing the other end to the wagon's axle. I'm going down first. You stay here and keep watch. I helped him check his knots and handed him a lantern. He looked at me once, then began his descent. I watched the rope play out. 10 feet, 20, 30. The lantern light grew fainter, then disappeared as Sam rounded a bend. The silence was absolute. Then Sam's voice echoed up, Miss Maggie, you need to see this. I tied my own rope and began my descent. The shaft was wider than expected, easily accommodating 2 people. The steel reinforcements continued deeper, creating a passage that felt more like a modern tunnel than a frontier mine. The walls were damp, moisture beading on the metal surfaces. I found Sam standing at a junction point where the original shaft intersected with a carved chamber, its walls smooth and deliberate, lit by a faint blue glow that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. What is this? I whispered. Look at the walls. The blue glow came from veins of material running through the rock. Not silver, not any mineral I recognized. When I touched it, my fingers came away tingling, but that wasn't what made my breath catch. The chamber was filled with equipment, complex mechanical structures of brass and steel, connected by cables, all leading deeper into the mine. Gauges and valves covered every surface, and in the center stood something that defied understanding, a cylindrical device perhaps 8 feet tall, covered in rotating bands of metal inscribed with mathematical notations. Sam moved to examine it. These markings, Miss Maggie, this is gradient analysis, magnetic field notation. This is a refinement system, an automated ore processing machine, but the design is decades ahead of current technology. I pulled out my journal, sketching frantically. The metallic residue I found, it's from testing this device. Someone built this here in secret. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, Subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Or it's been maintaining itself, Sam said, pointing to pipes along the ceiling. Look at the water system. It's automated, self-regulating. As if in response, the cylindrical device began to spin, its metal bands rotating in opposite directions, building speed. The humming grew louder, rising in pitch, until it resonated in my chest. The blue glowing veins pulsed brighter, synchronized with the machine's rhythm. Then I saw the corpse. He was slumped against the far wall, little more than bones and dried leather, his clothing marked with the insignia of the U.S. Geological Survey. In his skeletal hands he clutched a rolled piece of paper. I approached slowly. The document was a blueprint, rendered in precise technical detail. At the top, ore refinement via magnetic extraction. Patent application Dr. Isaac Harrow, 1879. Below that, a stamp, denied by order of territorial court. And below that, in angry handwriting, they won't let it exist, but I'll make sure someone finds it. Someone who'll understand what they've done. Sam, I said, we need to... The grinding sound came again, louder, closer. The entire chamber shook. A support beam near the entrance buckled, then snapped. The mine's destabilizing. Sam grabbed my arm. The machine's drawing too much power from the rock structure. We've triggered something. We ran for the entrance as the chamber collapsed around us, the machine still spinning, still humming. Behind us metal tore and stone fractured. I climbed the rope with desperate speed. Above me daylight beckoned. I emerged first, then helped pull Sam up. He broke the surface gasping, the blueprint clutched in his free hand. We collapsed on the ground as destruction continued beneath us. The earth trembled. The wooden framework groaned. Then, with finality, the entrance collapsed completely, sealing itself with fallen timber and stone. The mechanical humming stopped. We lay there in sudden silence, the afternoon sun beating down. I still held the blueprint Harrow had died protecting. We can't leave it buried, I said finally. Sam sat up slowly. It did change everything, Miss Maggie. 7 years ago, when 17 men died to keep it hidden, he pointed to the blueprint, to a notation I hadn't noticed. A list of names under financial investors. At the top, Judge Everett Mulleran. Below him, Elias Crow, mining foreman. And below that, a dozen other names, men of power and influence, all tied to a conspiracy that stretched from this mine to the highest offices in Nevada territory. They killed Harrow. I said, they killed everyone who knew, and they'll kill us too if they find out. Sam met my eyes. Then we'd better make May they don't find out, at least not until we're ready. As we gathered our equipment, I looked back at the collapsed shaft one last time. Somewhere deep beneath that rubble, Dr. Isaac Harrow's machine still waited. But truth doesn't die when you bury it. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig it up again. We had the blueprint. We had the truth, and in a town built on lies that made us the most dangerous people in Red Hollow. The question was, what would we do with that power before someone decided to silence us forever? The knock came at midnight, 3 sharp raps that shattered the silence of my rented room above the general store. I'd been studying Harrow's blueprint by lamplight, tracing the intricate mechanical notations with my finger, trying to understand the genius that men of power had decided to bury. The device wasn't just a refinement system. It was revolution, a magnetic extraction process that could separate precious metals from ore with unprecedented efficiency, eliminating the need for dangerous chemical treatments and reducing processing time by half. This wasn't just valuable. This was world-changing. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I rolled the blueprint carefully and tucked it inside my journal, then moved to the door with my surveying hammer gripped tight in my right hand. Who is it? A friend of the mining industry, Miss Corbyn. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. The voice was smooth, educated, carrying the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I cracked the door open, keeping my body behind. The man standing in the hallway wore expensive clothes that looked absurdly out of place in Red Hollow, a tailored suit, polished boots, a silk vest that probably cost more than most miners earned in a month. His face was handsome in a calculated way, his smile practiced but not quite reaching his eyes. "Elias Crow," he said, tipping his hat with theatrical courtesy. "I represent the Nevada Mining Registry. May I come in?" I assure you my intentions are purely professional. Everything about him screamed danger. But I'd learned that sometimes you had to invite the snake into your camp to understand how it planned to bite you. I opened the door wider. "Professional visits usually happen during business hours, Mr. Crow. But professional courtesy demands I warn you before official business begins." He stepped inside, his eyes immediately scanning the room, cataloging every detail. They lingered for a fraction of a second on my desk, where the edge of my journal was visible. "I understand you've purchased the old Blaine claim. Unfortunate property. Tragic history. You're well informed about my business, Mr. Crow. It's my job to be informed, Miss Corbyn. The territorial government takes great interest in mining claims, particularly those with complicated pasts." He moved closer to my desk, his movements casual but purposeful. "I've been authorized to make you an offer. $1,000, cash, for the immediate transfer of all rights and claims to that property. A generous sum for land that everyone agrees is worthless. $1,000, more money than I'd seen in 2 years. Enough to start over somewhere new, somewhere far from Red Hollow and its buried secrets." "If the land is worthless," I said carefully, "why would anyone pay $1,000 for it?" Crow's smile widened, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Let's say there are parties interested in ensuring certain properties remain undisturbed. Historical preservation, if you will. The territorial court is quite concerned about unauthorized excavation of condemned sites." "I see. And if I refuse?" The smile vanished. Just for a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the calculation beneath, the cold assessment of a man deciding how much trouble I was worth. Then the charm returned, smooth as oil on water. "I would strongly advise against refusal, Miss Corbyn. This territory can be dangerous for women traveling alone. Accidents happen, mines collapse, people disappear." He pulled a card from his vest pocket, placing it on my desk with deliberate precision. "I'll be staying at the territorial office for the next 3 days. I do hope you'll consider my offer carefully." He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. "One more thing. I understand you've been spending time with Sam Dorsey, the local blacksmith. Fine man, devoted father. It would be terrible if anything were to happen to his daughter. Children are so vulnerable in frontier towns." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. I stood frozen, rage and fear warring in my chest. He'd threatened Annie, a child. Whatever moral ambiguity might have existed before, that single statement had crystallized everything into perfect clarity. These men weren't just corrupt, they were monsters. I moved immediately to secure the blueprint, wrapping it in oilcloth and hiding it beneath a loose floorboard. I'd noticed my first day here, then I checked my surveying equipment, my hands shaking with anger. Someone had been through my thing. The transit had been moved slightly, its adjustment screws loosened. My collection bags had been opened and resealed. They'd searched my room before Crow arrived, probably while I was at the mine site earlier. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, hammer in hand, watching the street below. Just before dawn, I saw a figure standing in the shadows across from the general store. Too far away to identify, but close enough to make his presence known. They were watching, and they wanted me to know they were watching. Sam arrived at first light, his face grim. Then he told me a man came by the smithy yesterday, asking questions about you. Well-dressed fellow. She said he made her uncomfortable. Elias Crow, I said, pouring coffee with hands that had steadied overnight. Fear was useless. Analysis was everything. He offered me $1,000 for the land. When I didn't immediately accept, he threatened your daughter. Sam's hands clenched into fists. He what? Not directly, just implied that accidents happen to children in frontier towns. The kind of threat that leaves no evidence but makes the message clear. Sam moved to the window, his jaw tight. I knew the Blaine situation was bad, but threatening children. Maggie, these people are capable of anything, which is why we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. I retrieved the blueprint from its hiding place, spreading it across the table. I spent half the night studying this. Harrow wasn't just inventing a better refinement system. He was revolutionizing the entire mining industry. Sam leaned over the blueprint, his engineer's eye immediately grasping the implications. This magnetic extraction process, it would eliminate the need for mercury amalgamation. No more mercury poisoning. No more toxic runoff. And the efficiency gains. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. This would put every conventional smelting operation out of business within 5 years.
Exactly.
And look at the investor list. I pointed to the names at the bottom. Judge Mulleran, Elias Crow, half the Territorial Mining Board. These men didn't just have money invested in conventional mining operations, they had fortunes at stake. So they killed Harrow and buried his invention to protect their investments. And they killed 17 miners to make sure no one could prove it. The collapse wasn't an accident, Sam. It was murder, disguised as industrial tragedy. I rolled the blueprint carefully. The question is, what do we do with this information? Sam was quiet for a long moment, staring at the names on that list. My father-in-law was one of those 17 men. Tom Blaine raised my wife. God rest her soul. He taught Annie to ride. He was a good man who died for someone else's greed. He looked at me, and I saw the resolve in his eyes. We expose them, all of them. We make sure the world knows what they did. They'll kill us first. You understand that. They'll try, but we're not alone anymore. And I'm not about to let men like Crow win just because they're willing to threaten children. A thought occurred to me, pieces clicking into place. Crow said he was staying at the territorial office, not the hotel. Why would a mining registry representative have access to government facilities? Sam's expression darkened. Because he's not just a representative, he's working directly for Mulleran. The judge doesn't just invest in mining, he controls the territorial court system. He can bury evidence, dismiss charges, make people disappear legally. Then we need someone outside his jurisdiction. Someone who can get this story to people Mulleran can't touch. The territorial press is in his pocket. The federal marshals answer to judges. Who's left? I thought back to something I'd noticed my first week in Red Hollow, a woman traveling alone, well-dressed but not wealthy, carrying a leather case that looked like it might hold a writer's tools. She'd been asking questions at the general store, claiming to be writing about frontier life for an Eastern magazine. There was a woman here last week, said she was a travel writer. But travel writers don't usually ask questions about mining accidents and property disputes. Sam nodded slowly. I saw her too, sharp-eyed, took notes about everything. She's staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street, name's Lydia something. Then I think it's time I had a conversation with Miss Lydia something. I found Lydia Bellamy in the boarding house dining room, eating breakfast and reading a week-old newspaper from San Francisco. Up close she was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing and ink stains on her fingers that marked her as someone who spent more time writing than claiming to write. I sat down across from her without invitation. You're not a travel writer, she didn't look up from her newspaper. And you're not just a down-on-her-luck geologist who bought a cursed mine on a whim. I suppose we're both guilty of incomplete honesty. What are you really doing in Red Hollow? Lydia folded her newspaper with precise movements, finally meeting my eyes. Investigating a pattern of mining accidents that spanned 3 territories and 7 years. 17 men dead here, 12 in Colorado, 8 in California, all mines sealed immediately afterward, all property seized for unpaid debts within months, all records mysteriously incomplete. She leaned forward, and all connected to Judge Everett Malloran and his associates. My heart raced. You know about Malloran. I know he's built an empire on stolen mining technology and buried bodies. What I don't have is proof. Evidence has a way of disappearing when Malloran's involved. Witnesses have a way of changing their stories or dying. She studied me carefully. But you found something, haven't you? Something that scared Elias Crow badly enough to offer you $1,000 to walk away. I made a decision in that moment that would either save us or condemn us. I have Dr. Isaac Harrow's patent blueprint, and I can prove Malloran and Crow buried his invention and murdered everyone who knew about it. Lydia's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten on the newspaper. Do you understand what you're holding? That's not just evidence of murder. That's evidence of a conspiracy that reaches into territorial courts, federal mining offices, and half the banking institutions in Nevada. Which is why I need someone who can get this story to people Malloran can't silence. Can you do that? I write for the Boston Herald. We have connections to every major newspaper in the eastern states. Malloran's influence ends at the Mississippi. She paused. But I need more than just a blueprint. I need testimony, documentation, a narrative that proves premeditation. I can give you that, and I know someone who can authenticate the technical specifications. Sam Dorsey was trained as a mining engineer before. The boarding house door slammed open. Elias Crow stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 men wearing territorial marshal badges. His charming facade had vanished completely, replaced by cold fury. Margaret Corbyn, he said, his voice carrying through the dining room. You're under arrest for illegal excavation of condemned property and theft of territorial asset. Lydia stood smoothly, positioning herself between Crow and me. Under whose authority, Mr. Crow? Last I checked, the Nevada Mining Registry doesn't have arrest powers. Crow's eyes narrowed. Miss Bellamy, I should have known you'd insert yourself into this situation. These marshals represent Judge Malloran's court. Miss Corbyn is wanted for questioning regarding property damage and safety violations, property she legally owns, Lydia countered. And I don't see any warrants. In fact, I don't see any legal paperwork at all. Just 3 men trying to intimidate a woman in a public dining room. One of the marshals moved forward, but Sam Dorsey stepped through the boarding house door behind them, flanked by 4 other men I recognized from around town. Miners, shopkeepers, men who'd lost friends in the Blaine shaft collapse. These marshals seem lost, Sam said quietly. Maybe they need directions back to the territorial office. The room held its breath. Crow's hand moved toward his vest pocket, and I saw the outline of a pistol beneath the fabric, but he was outnumbered, and he knew it. This isn't over, Miss Corbyn, Crow said, his voice deadly calm. Judge Malloran takes a personal interest in this property. He'll be arriving in Red Hollow tomorrow to settle this matter permanently. Good, Lydia said, pulling a notebook from her bag. I've been wanting to interview the judge about his mining investments and their correlation with fatal industrial accidents. I'm sure my readers in Boston would find his perspective fascinating. Crow's face went pale. For the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker across his features. You wouldn't dare publish those accusations. They're not accusations if I have evidence, Mr. Crow. They're investigative journalism. And unlike territorial courts, the Eastern press doesn't answer to frontier judges. She smiled pleasantly. Now I believe these gentlemen asked you to leave. The marshals exchanged glances, then backed toward the door. Crow remained a moment longer, his eyes locked on mine. You have no idea what you've started, he said. Then he was gone. The door slamming behind him, the dining room erupted into conversation. Sam moved to my side, his hand on my shoulder. You all right? Better than all right. We have an ally. I looked at Lydia. You just made yourself a target. She waved dismissively. I became a target the moment I started investigating Malloran's empire. At least now we can work together. She pulled out a sheaf of papers from her leather case. I have 6 years of documentation on Malloran's land acquisitions, mining accidents, and suspicious property transfers. You have physical evidence linking him to murder and industrial theft. Sam has technical expertise to validate the technology. Between us, we have everything we need to destroy him. Except time, Sam said. If Malloran's arriving tomorrow, we have less than 24 hours to prepare. Lydia smiled, and there was something fierce in it. Then we'd better get started. Miss Corbyn, I'm going to need that blueprint. Sam, can you forge tools to extract the machine from the collapsed shaft? I stared at her. You want to excavate Harrow's device? The mine is completely collapsed. It would take weeks, maybe months. We don't need the entire machine, just enough components to prove it exists and functions. Photographs won't be enough. Malloran will claim they're fabricated. But physical evidence witnessed by multiple parties, authenticated by engineers. She looked between us. That's irrefutable. Sam nodded slowly. The main shaft is blocked, but there's an old ventilation tunnel that connects to the Harrow chamber from the North Ridge. It's narrow, dangerous, but passable. If we move fast, we could reach the device before Malloran arrives. And if he comes while we're underground? I asked. Then we make sure someone stays above to document whatever he does. Lydia said. This story gets published regardless of what happens to us individually. That's how we win. Not by surviving, but by ensuring the truth survives. I looked at the blueprint tucked under my arm, at Sam's determined face, at Lydia's fierce intelligence. We were a geologist, a blacksmith, and a journalist against a judge who controlled an entire territory's legal system. The odds were impossible, but truth had a weight of its own, and sometimes that weight was enough to tip even the most unbalanced scales. Then let's go dig up a revolution, I said. We had less than a day to expose a conspiracy 7 years in the making. And if we failed, we wouldn't just lose our lives. We'd lose the only chance to make 17 dead miners' sacrifice mean something. The clock was ticking, and the depths were waiting to speak one final time. We descended into darkness by torchlight, 3 unlikely conspirators carrying the weight of truth into the Earth's buried secrets. The ventilation tunnel was exactly as Sam had described, narrow, treacherous, carved through living rock by miners who'd needed air more than comfort. We moved single file, Sam leading with his equipment, me in the middle with the blueprint and documentation tools, Lydia bringing up the rear with her camera and notebooks wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture. The tunnel descended at a sharp angle, forcing us to brace ourselves against the walls. Water seeped through cracks in the stone, making every surface slick and unreliable. My lantern cast wild shadows that danced across ancient pick marks, the ghosts of labor, long forgotten. How much farther? Lydia asked, her voice tight. She wasn't accustomed to enclosed spaces, and I could hear the controlled panic beneath her words. Another 100 yards, Sam said. The tunnel intersects with the Harrow chamber from above. We'll need to use rope to descend the final 20 feet. I checked my pocket watch. We'd been underground for 40 minutes. Dawn was breaking above us, and with it came the likelihood of Malloran's arrival. Annie was stationed at the property gate with 2 trusted miners, with instructions to fire 3 warning shots if anyone approached. We'd hear it even down here, Sam had assured me. Sound carried strangely through these tunnels. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vertical shaft. Sam held his lantern over the edge, illuminating the chamber below. Even from this height, I could see the machine, Harrow's revolutionary device, still intact despite the partial collapse, its brass and steel surfaces gleaming in the lamplight. There, I breathed. It's still there. Sam secured ropes around a natural rock formation, testing their strength with his full weight before nodding satisfaction. Miss Bellamy, you'll need to leave your camera here and retrieve it on the way back up. It's too bulky to carry during the descent. Lydia set up her tripod with practiced efficiency, adjusting the camera to capture the chamber below. I'll take photographs from here first. Document everything before we disturb it. While she worked, I studied the chamber through Sam's spyglass. The collapse had actually protected the machine. Debris had fallen around it rather than on it, creating a earthed barrier. But I could also see new damage. The cylindrical core was cracked, its rotating bands frozen at odd angles. Whatever we'd triggered during our first visit had damaged the device, perhaps fatally. Ready, Lydia said, collapsing her tripod. Let's go meet history. Sam descended first, his movements confident despite the danger. I followed, my hands burning against the rope, my surveying tools banging awkwardly against my hip. Lydia came last, her controlled breathing the only sign of her fear. My boots touched the chamber floor and immediately I felt it, that vibration I'd sensed from the surface, but stronger now, more insistent. The machine wasn't running, but it wasn't entirely dormant either. Something within it still pulsed with residual energy, like a heart that refused to stop beating even after death. Careful where you step, Sam warned, pointing to cracks in the floor. The chamber's stability is compromised. We need to work fast. I moved to where we'd found Harrow's body during our first visit. The skeleton was gone, buried under rubble from the collapse, but something else had been revealed. A metal box, half crushed but still sealed, bearing the stamped letters, IH. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside, preserved by the dry underground air, was a leather-bound ledger. Sam, Lydia, look at this. They gathered around as I opened the ledger to its first page. Harrow's handwriting, precise and methodical, documented everything. Dates of meetings with investors, promises made and broken, technical specifications stolen and buried. And on the final pages, a complete accounting of the conspiracy. Lydia read over my shoulder, her breath catching. Harrow knew they were going to kill him. This ledger is his testimony from beyond the grave. There's more, Sam said, pointing to a notation on the last page. Names of the 17 miners who died, and beside each name, a mark indicating they were witnesses. They saw the machine work. They knew what Malloran and Crow were trying to hide. So they were murdered, I said quietly. All of them. The collapse wasn't an accident. It was an execution. The chamber suddenly shook. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Somewhere above us, something heavy struck stone, 3 times, evenly spaced. The warning shots, Sam said, his face grim. Someone's coming. Then we take what we can carry and move, Lydia said, already securing the ledger in her oilcloth wrap. Miss Maggie, can you remove a component from the machine? Something small enough to transport but significant enough to prove its function. I approached Harrow's device with reverence and urgency. The rotating bands were marked with mathematical notations, the key to understanding the magnetic extraction process. I pulled my surveying hammer from my belt and carefully struck the mounting bolts. The machine responded. As soon as I disturbed the first bolt, the device began to spin. Slowly at first, then building speed, the bands rotating in opposite directions with increasing momentum. The blue glowing veins in the walls pulsed brighter, synchronized with the machine's rhythm. That impossible humming rose to a shriek. What did you do? Sam shouted over the noise. I don't know. It must have a fail-safe. Any tampering triggers activation. The chamber floor buckled. Cracks raced across the stone like lightning frozen in rock. The machine spun faster, drawing power from somewhere deep in the earth, its magnetic fields visible now as distortions in the air itself. We need to shut it down. Lydia grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the ropes. If it destabilizes further, this entire section will collapse. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I grabbed the mounting band I'd loosened, wrenching it free with desperate strength. The metal came away in my hands, still warm with residual energy, covered in Harrow's notations, physical proof, irrefutable evidence. "Now we go," I shouted. Sam pushed me toward the rope. "Climb." "I'll help, Miss Bellamy." I climbed with strength born of pure terror, my muscles screaming, the mounting band tucked into my belt. Above me, daylight beckoned through the ventilation shaft. Below me, the machine's shriek reached an unbearable pitch. I broke through into the tunnel as the chamber ceiling gave way. Sam and Lydia emerged seconds later, all of us scrambling on hands and knees as the collapse chased us up the passage. Rock and dust filled the air. The tunnel walls shook. Behind us, the Harrow chamber sealed itself forever, the machine's final scream cut short by tons of falling stone. We emerged into brilliant morning sunlight, collapsing on the ground, coughing and gasping. I still held the mounting band. Lydia still clutched the ledger. Sam had somehow managed to save both the blueprint and Lydia's camera plates. We had everything we needed to destroy Malloran's empire. But when I looked toward the property gate, my blood ran cold. Elias Crow stood there, flanked by 6 armed men, and behind them, sitting tall in an expensive carriage, was Judge Everett Malloran himself. "Well," Crow said, drawing his pistol, "isn't this convenient? All 3 troublemakers in one place, covered in evidence of illegal excavation. The judge will be so pleased." They bound our hands with rope and marched us to the sealed mine entrance, where Judge Malloran waited with the patient satisfaction of a man who'd already won. He was older than I'd expected, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that inspired trust in courtrooms and terror in backrooms. His suit was immaculate, despite the desert dust, his hands soft and uncalloused. A man who'd built his empire on other people's labor and other people's graves. "Miss Corbyn," he said, his voice carrying the measured tones of authority. "I had hoped you would accept Mr. Crow's generous offer. This Artak is far less pleasant for everyone involved." Lydia spat dust at his feet. "Less pleasant for you, you mean? Once my newspaper publishes what we've found, your empire crumbles." Malloran smiled indulgently. "Your newspaper will publish nothing, Miss Bellamy. Tragic mining accident. 3 people illegally excavating condemned property. The shaft collapsed. As these things so often do, by the time your body is recovered, if it's recovered, your notes will be conveniently lost. You can't kill us in broad daylight," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "There are witnesses. The townspeople know we're here. Witnesses can be persuaded, or purchased, or threatened." Malloran gestured to Crow, who produced a document from his coat. "I've already prepared the death certificates. The Territorial Marshal's office will file them this afternoon. By this evening, the 3 of you will be nothing more than a cautionary tale about the dangers of amateur mining." Crow moved behind us, checking our bonds. His hands lingered on Lydia's shoulder, and I saw murder in his eyes. This wasn't just business for him anymore, this was personal. "The machine is destroyed," Crow reported to Malloran. "The second collapse sealed the chamber permanently. Whatever evidence they found ends here." "Excellent." Malloran produced a pocket watch, checking the time with theatrical precision. "We'll wait until noon, then stage the accident. Crow, please ensure our guests remain comfortable until then." That's when I heard it. The sound of horses approaching at speed. Multiple horses, moving fast across the desert hardpan. Crow drew his pistol, and Malloran's confident expression fractured for the first time. "Who?" Sam Dorsey emerged from behind the collapsed mine entrance, Annie at his side. But they weren't alone. Behind them rode 4 men wearing the distinctive badges of federal marshals, not territorial appointees under Malloran's control, but federal agents answering to Washington. And leading them was a woman I recognized from the boarding house. The proprietor, who'd seemed too interested in our conversations, who'd asked too many careful questions. "Judge Malloran," she said, dismounting with official precision. "I'm Marshal Catherine Wright, appointed by the Department of Interior to investigate irregularities in territorial mining contracts. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and abuse of judicial authority." Malloran's face went white, then red with rage. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is territorial business. Federal mining regulations supersede territorial law. Your Honor, and Miss Bellamy's newspaper contacted the Interior Department 6 months ago with allegations of systematic corruption. We've been building a case ever since." Marshal Wright gestured to her deputies. "Miss Corbyn's recent discoveries simply accelerated our timeline." Crow's pistol came up, aimed at the marshal. His hand shook, and I saw a man making his final calculation. He could surrender and face trial. He could fight and die, but take some of us with him. He chose violence. The gunshot echoed across the desert, but Crow's aim was wild. Panic overriding precision. The bullet struck rock. Sam tackled Annie to the ground as the marshals returned fire. Crow stumbled backward, a red stain spreading across his chest, his expression one of surprise rather than pain. He fell to his knees, then collapsed face first into the dust. The pistol slipped from his finger. Malloran tried to run. He made it 3 steps before a deputy caught him, forcing him to the ground with professional efficiency. The judge struggled, his dignity shattering into rage and terror. "You don't understand," he screamed. "That machine would have destroyed everything. Decades of investment. Thousands of jobs. I did what was necessary. You murdered 17 men," I said quietly. "You buried a genius and his invention because it threatened your fortune. And you would have killed us too, without hesitation." Marshal Wright cut our bonds with a knife, her expression grim. "We'll need your testimony, all 3 of you, and we'll need the evidence you recovered." Lydia handed over the ledger, now wrapped in her blood-stained jacket. Harrow documented everything. Dates, names, payments. "It's all there, and we have a component from the machine itself," Sam added, showing the mounting band I still clutched like a talisman. Physical proof that it existed and functioned. Marshal Wright examined the ledger with professional detachment, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, satisfaction perhaps, or vindication. "This is more than enough. Miss Bellamy, your newspaper was right to involve federal authorities. This conspiracy reaches into territorial courts, land offices, and banking institutions across 3 territories. As the marshals secured Malloran in their carriage, I walked to where Crow lay dead in the dust. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. A man who'd chosen greed over conscience and paid the price. The ground beneath us rumbled one final time. The collapsed mine settled into its new configuration, sealing Harrow's revolutionary machine deeper than human hands would ever reach again. The mechanical hum faded to silence. Annie tugged at my sleeve. "Is it over, Miss Maggie?" I looked at Sam, at Lydia, at the marshals leading Malloran away in chains, at the sealed mine that held both tragedy and triumph in its depths. "The hard part's over," I said, "but the real work is just beginning." 6 months later, I stood at the sealed mine entrance with Lydia Bellamy and watched the sunset paint Red Hollow in shades of redemption. The trial had lasted 3 months. Judge Malloran and 14 co-conspirators had been convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and in Malloran's case, accessory to murder. The federal government had seized his estates and mining holdings, redistributing the assets to victims' families. Thomas Blaine's daughter, Willa, had received enough settlement money to buy back her father's land and establish a proper memorial for the 17 men who died. Lydia's newspaper had published her exposé under the headline, "The Depths That Spoke," how one woman's 10-cent gamble exposed a territorial conspiracy. The story had been reprinted in 43 newspapers across the country. My name had been cleared. The government had offered me a position as chief geological surveyor for Nevada Territory, along with a formal apology for my previous dismissal. I'd accepted the apology but declined the position. Some wounds heal better when you don't return to the place that caused them. Instead, I'd used my settlement money to establish the Harrow Institute for Geological Innovation, a research facility dedicated to developing mining technologies that prioritized worker safety and environmental protection. Sam Dorsey had agreed to serve as chief engineer. Together, we were rebuilding the industry that corruption had poisoned. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Buying this mine, starting all of this?" I considered the question while the desert wind whispered through sagebrush and old mining equipment. I regret the lives lost. I regret that Harrow never saw his invention change the world, but regret the choice itself. No, some truths are worth the cost of uncovering them. Lydia smiled, her reporter's notebook already in hand, despite the informal nature of our visit. She was writing a book now, a comprehensive history of the conspiracy. Publishers in Boston and New York were competing for the rights. "I'm calling the final chapter The Machine That Waits," she said, "because even though it's buried, the principle behind it isn't. Engineers are already working on magnetic separation techniques based on your testimony about Harrow's design. His ideas will live on, even if the physical machine doesn't." As if in response to her words, I felt it, that familiar vibration humming up through the ground beneath my boots, faint but unmistakable. The machine's pulse weaker now but still present, still patient, still waiting in its tomb of stone. Lydia felt it too. Is it still functioning somehow? Maybe it always will be. Harrow built it to last, and apparently he succeeded. I knelt and placed my palm flat against the sealed mine entrance. The vibration resonated through my hand, a mechanical heartbeat from deep below. But that's all right. Some discoveries aren't meant to be excavated. Some truths are enough just knowing they exist. Sam and Annie approached on horseback, returning from inspecting our new mining cooperative's first operational site. The Dorsey-Corbyn Mining Company specialized in teaching ethical extraction methods to independent prospectors. We'd already trained 40 miners and prevented 3 accidents that would have been fatal under the old, careless methods. Annie dismounted and ran to me, her face bright with excitement. "Miss Maggie, Papa says the new ventilation system you designed is working perfectly. No one's gotten sick from bad air, and the extraction rates are higher than before." I hugged her, this brave girl who'd helped save us by fetching federal marshals when Mulleran arrived. "Your father's engineering deserves most of the credit. I just calculated the airflow equations." "She's being modest," Sam said, dismounting with a smile. "Your equations revolutionized the entire process. Harrow would be proud." Annie pressed her ear against the sealed mine entrance, listening. "The mine's still singing. Why hasn't it stopped, Miss Maggie?" I knelt beside her, looking into her curious eyes. "What do you hear when you listen, Annie?" She closed her eyes, concentrating, like gears turning, like something working, like it's trying to tell us something. Maybe it is. Maybe that machine down there is reminding us about something important. What? I thought about Harrow, alone in that chamber, dying but determined that someone would find his work. I thought about the 17 miners who'd witnessed his genius and paid with their lives. I thought about the corrupt men who'd tried to bury truth itself because it threatened their fortunes. "It's reminding us that truth doesn't die when you bury it," I said. "It just waits, patient and persistent, until someone brave enough comes along to dig it up again. That hum you hear, that's the sound of knowledge refusing to stay silent. That's the sound of progress reminding us that it can't be stopped, only delayed." Annie nodded seriously, processing this. "So, we should always listen for the truth, even when it's buried deep. Especially when it's buried deep. The hardest truths to find are usually the most important ones." Lydia closed her notebook, joining us at the mine entrance. "I'm leaving for Boston tomorrow. The book needs my full attention, and I have speaking engagements at 3 universities about investigative journalism and corruption in frontier territories. Will you come back?" I asked. "Eventually, Red Hollow has a way of calling people back." She looked at the sealed mine, at the desert stretching toward mountains painted gold by the setting sun. "Besides, Someone needs to document what you're building here. The Harrow Institute, the mining cooperative, the reforms you're implementing. This is the story of how one woman's curiosity and courage changed an entire industry. One woman and her allies, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. That's what makes it a good story, Lydia said. The best revolutions are never fought by individuals. They're fought by people who refuse to let injustice win. We stood together as darkness gathered, 4 people who'd survived corruption's attempt to silence us. Above, stars emerged one by one. Below, the machine hummed its endless song. And between those two certainties, the vast universe above and the stubborn truth below, we'd found our purpose. Sam spoke into the gathering darkness. I've been thinking about something Harrow wrote in his ledger. He said, "If they bury me, I'll haunt them from below. If they bury my work, it'll rise again in someone else's hands." Truth has a weight that can't be suppressed forever. He was right, I said, about the weight of truth, about it rising again. I turned from the mine entrance, ready to return to town, to the work that waited, to the future we were building. But he was wrong about one thing. "What's that?" Annie asked. "Truth doesn't haunt. It liberates. It gives voice to the silent and power to the powerless." What we heard in these depths wasn't a ghost. It was a promise. A promise that knowledge, once created, can never truly die. We mounted our horses and began the ride back to Red Hollow. Behind us, the mine continued its mechanical song, fainter now but eternal. Some say it still hums to this day, that patient pulse rising through stone and soil. People ask me if it's the machine or merely the wind, geology or something more. I tell them it doesn't matter which. What matters is that we listen, because truth never sleeps. It just waits, resonating in the darkness, calling out to anyone brave enough to descend into the depths and hear what the earth has been trying to tell us all along. The mine spoke once, and because we listened, 17 dead men found their justice, a murdered genius found his legacy, and I found my purpose. That's enough for any geologist. That's enough for any life. The depths have spoken, and their echo will carry forward through every honest extraction, every ethical innovation, every person who chooses truth over profit. That's the real treasure buried beneath Red Hollow. Not silver, not gold, not even revolutionary technology. Just the simple, persistent, inevitable truth that integrity can't be buried forever. And sometimes, if you listen carefully enough, you can still hear it humming. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.